Okay, brilliant. I'll hand over to you, Marcus.
Thanks, Drew, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It's great that so many have come along to this webinar, and I hope you find it useful. We're talking about today. We're talking about that very, very challenging time for you as individuals when you're applying for jobs, and quite often it'll be your first job in the ecology sector. And we hope that the idea behind today is that we can talk you through and get some feedback from you as well on some tips for making that the most efficient and most enjoyable process that you can get through. So this slide, we're just going through what we cover here, and note that we're going to ask some Menti questions.
Love you.
Sorry. So we're going to ask some Menti questions here, and we have a code for that. Drew, do you want to talk us through how that will work very briefly?
Yeah. So hopefully most of you are signed in on your computers. So all you'll need to do is go to www.menti.com and it will ask you to enter in a code to take part in a Menti survey. If you make note of those numbers, they'll be up on the slides anyway. Make note of those numbers, enter them in, and then you'll be able to take part in the questions live, which will be brilliant. Great to hear your answers.
Yeah, and if you could do that now, because we're going to ask 2 questions at the start, and that would be brilliant. And that the first question is really for our benefit, so we understand perhaps more for future note than today, but so that we understand really the jobs that you are looking for as individuals in this sector. And we're going to go through then your application process, tips for the interview, and then the various different areas of ecology that you can work in. We're going to give some bespoke tips for those sectors. And so there's a group of us talking. I'm obviously introducing it. My name is Marcus Kohler. I'm director and founder of Ecology, and I've worked on the consultancy side of things largely. I've also worked for NGOs, but with these slides, I've been assisted by Owen Gabb, who's director at another fine consultancy called BSG, Baker Shepherd Gillespie, and Jenny Downey, who's in a larger consultancy. WSP has also helped with those slides. After I've spoken a bit about consultancy and generic tips, Rachel Bentley, who is biodiversity officer at the Environment Agency, is going to talk about how you apply for jobs within the public sector, and some of the peculiar characteristics of that kind of application. And then Jennifer Dodd, who is a lecturer at Edinburgh Napier University and also works in the world of environmental consultancy. Jennifer is going to talk through how we look at academia and how you apply for jobs in academia. And all those people are members of our committee and have helped with with forming the committee and now with the events so far. We also have very kindly Paul Wilkinson has stepped in, who's the chief executive of Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust, to talk about working in NGO and charity sector. So hopefully between us, we're going to cover most of the scenarios that you will be considering in your next career path. We've also got a small just a slide at the end to talk about the marine and coastal special interest group event that's going on that will be of interest to you. So if we go to question 1 now, please, Drew. So if you share the screen, that'd be great. I'll just go back and again, everyone, if they're on menti.com and put in that code, and Drew will now, if you could take the screen, Drew.
Yeah, hopefully you can see it. It says I am sharing, so.
Okay, I can't see it. I don't know if others can.
Anyone else from the committee see it?
No, I can just see Marcus's slides.
Okay. Marcus, if you can stop sharing.
Yeah, okay, that's a very good point. Thank you.
We can see them now.
Okay.
Yep. Brilliant.
Okay, so any more votes coming in? You know how it goes, you know, we like a swinger meter sort of late on. Well, a few more coming in from consultancy. Jennifer, looks like you're going to have a quiet evening.
Jennifer's gonna. Oh, well.
I know that's
somebody
great.
Somebody on the committee, please put academia. Just
for me. Maybe I should put it in.
I'd like an academic if it's not too late.
Government bodies aren't doing very well either.
No, we should vote for each other, Rachel. At least get the numbers up.
Oh no,
guys! Look at the undersided. The undersided.
Yes, I know. We'll persuade them.
We've got a few comments in the chat saying they're undecided.
Good on you, Helen. Thank you for putting that in the chat, and that's appreciated. Thank you. Thank you. Brilliant. So if you go back to my screen now, that'd be great. So clearly, as we suspected, a lot of people looking for works in consultancy, and I hope the reasons for that are really positive. And I just realized we're going to ask another question, so that was a bit silly of me to share the screen. So I hope everyone got the idea of how to use Menti, because we're going to ask you to do it again now. So we're going to ask this question, and Drew, probably if I go to you again. So if everyone's on Menti again, I'll go back and show there's the code showing there. And the reason we're asking this question is really pivotal in your thinking for applying for a job, because we want you to think of the job application from the employer's perspective, and this question does that. So I will stop sharing. I don't know, Drew, how the question works, whether will the participants already have seen it? You're on mute, sorry.
Sorry, they should have seen it. Yeah, you have to enter in just a single word. There we go, there's some words coming in now. Yeah, if you just enter in single words, it kind of merges them together into a nice little word map like this. Word cloud. So it only lets you put in quite short statements, but
yeah, sorry, I was meant to say and I forgot, keep it to 1 or 2 words, but some really good things coming up there, one of which of course is spelling, but getting more stuff in here. Inspiring.
I think your center word is showing quite nicely.
Yeah. So let's have a look at them. Degree, professional membership. Keep them flowing, guys. If you're still thinking about it, identification, that's probably taxonomic groups. Driving license, really good point. Really good point.
Enthusiasm as well, which is nice to see.
What was that, Jennifer? Sorry?
Enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm, yeah, great. Ambitious, brilliant.
Yeah.
Masters, that's an interesting one. Do you need a master's? We'll touch upon that. The short answer is no, but it's great if you've got one, and of course it gives you a wealth of a skill set. That's really interesting. Thank you for that. That's really interesting. Taxonomic ID, great. Okay, brilliant. Self-disciplined, yes, good, really good points on there. So we're going to hopefully touch upon them. If we don't, make a note of it and we go back to it. Safe working, that's an excellent addition. So if I can go back to my screen now, thank you. Okay, so as we said, we want you to think about the fact that we we're on receiving, well, we will receive, you know, on average, let's say 50 applications for every job that is applied, that is offered. And we have to go through, your first task is to get through that first stage. And it's undoubtedly true that we will lose the odd good candidate in that process. So think about what we're looking for. Think about simplifying that process for that person at that first stage, because it is staggered, and the larger consultancy you get, people will look at that and will narrow it down before the directors. I don't even get to look at all the CVs. So another director very kindly does that, but it's a task that is delegated. And a really simple thing is make sure you state your name, position applied for in the email title. It sounds obvious, but people like that, I know from, you know, so many people just don't put the title in properly. It's a really basic thing, but think about it. Think about the professionalism of your application, and the subject email is really important. If you send the email too early, we've all done it. Send it again. Send it again with the right things pointed out. Just say, sorry, went too early. That's better than not sending it like that. The first CVs that will get put on the poll for no interview are those ones that are generic. There's no letter. The letter might have a different company on there. It might not have anything bespoke to the company. It might not even have a letter with it. If you're sending out loads of CVs, that's not going to work. Well, loads of CVs without, if you had sent out loads of CVs at once and not guiding your CV towards a specific job, then you're going to get put on the reject file. Don't think of the numbers game. Think of, I want this job. What am I going to get for it? You know, why do you want this job? Why do you want it? What appeals to you? And this is a phrase that we talked a lot about in the committee. Passion is good. Is passion good? It is, but it has to be. Loads of people tell us they're passionate, but then have no real example of that. It's great to say passionate, you know, it's actions and words. How are you passionate? How have you gone out into the field to enjoy wildlife? What have you done to show us that you really want to make a difference and really want to be part and an ecological consultant? That's a real key aspect of it. So don't just tell us you're passionate, tell us why you're passionate. And of course, then it comes into the more dry skills, your relevant skills. Don't just think about the field, think about the office as well. You know, what can you bring to this? What have you learned through your 1 or 2 degrees that will bring you forward? Have you done GIS? You know, what areas have you specialized in this, and so forth? And this is really important. From my perspective, this is something that really changes my view of a candidate. Don't try and spin it. You're at the beginning of your career. We're not expecting you to know everything. And we'll come back to this a bit more, but just be honest about where you are. You know, that's a much better way of approaching it. You can't do you know, you will get found out if you try and say you are more than what you are. And to be honest, you know, that always leaves people a bit uncomfortable, because we think, well, that interview wasn't great because the person actually was not the same as what we thought. Spelling, it can really set you down. If you muck up your spelling, see environment spelt wrong. I know it's small, but it's just another. You're dealing with margins here, and it might just throw you. You might be number 8, and we're in an interview in 7, and say, well, that person couldn't spell environment. Yeah, really good resource here that I was in with Drew, Green Jobs for Nature. It's a fantastic new resource that has got lots of further tips on how to develop your CV, what career you're looking for. For those undecided, it's got all different examples of people that are working. Really exciting. Really good resource for you. Look it up, study it, and help that form your application. And finally, get somebody to proofread it. If you proofread it yourself, you will miss it. Certainly if you proofread it straight away. If you've got nobody else to proofread it, sleep on it, do it the next morning, as long as the application is going to be in by midnight. Okay, just some tips there. So yeah, a bit more on that, more generic things, you know, again, going back to that, show your starting point, show where you are, adapt your CV to the position. All the, again, the dry skills there. And something I always look for, I'm really interested in people as rounded characters. I'm really interested if somebody plays the cello, because, you know, I think I just admire people who can play music. I'm really interested in somebody who plays team sport because they're a team sport person. I'm also interested in somebody who plays an individual sport because it's just great that they're outdoors. It doesn't have, you know, we're looking for rounded individuals that can hold a conversation ultimately with a client who may have no interest in ecology. And, you know, that goes across the board. If you're more rounded, it's really interesting. The worst thing I've seen on interest is I like watching TV. Just think about it, okay? So, you know, and you know, obviously your academic skills are really important. Avoid big gaps in your CV because you're going to get asked questions about it. And again, it might tip you one way or the other in getting to that interview stage. Something I'm really keen on is positive traveling. You know, loads of people travel these days. That's great. Brilliant that you travel. But I want to hear about your traveling in terms of ecology. If you just said that, you know, I went to Southeast Asia for 6 months, not really, I'm not sold on that. If you've told me you've gone to some reserves there and you've gone look for wildlife, I'm really looking at you. I'm thinking this person is keen. And if you can't find a job now, go traveling and do it like that. Enjoy yourself. You're only young once, as I keep reminding myself. Okay, so last one from me for a while. So some bespoke things for consultancy here, and some of which I've touched upon. Again, you know, skill set, we're expecting you to be at the start of your career. It's great if you've got an interest in a taxonomic group and you've taken that to a certain stage. We're really interested in you then. But a lot of people won't. But what we want to see is how you're going to develop that. And this is where I was going back to that spin idea. Loads of people tell me I'm experiencing bat surveys. And I ask them a question, well, what bats did you record on those bat surveys? And they might say, I don't know, pipistrelle, a pipistrelle. I said, well, what pipistrelle was it? If you've done bat surveys, make sure before you come to an interview, you know what species you dealt with, and you know how to identify them, because I will ask you questions about how do you identify a noctule. You did a bat survey, you recorded these species, how did I identify them? And that's much better. And to say to actually be straightforward and honest, that say I've done 3 bat surveys and I encountered the following species. That's great, because that tells you that person is honest, is on a learning curve, but has consolidated that knowledge. And I'm really interested in that person because he or she has recorded that knowledge and has really taken it to heart where he or she is. Great. That's a better way of doing it. And it's the same, you know, same principle with botany as well. Where are you, botany? So don't oversell it, but do describe in detail what you've done. So some generic interview tips before we actually go into the sectors. You've got through your interview, well done, because you've already achieved something. Pat yourself on the back. Don't get much patting on the back when you're at this stage, but well done for getting to your interview. This is, you know, it's an interesting dynamic, and the dynamic is between 2 sets of people. you know, you may be the 4th interview on the day, and we may be dealing with other stuff and may not given you the time that we would ideally have been at. So if you're feeling nervous, which is fine, say so, because that's a good act of communication. It's saying, sorry guys, a bit nervous. And we might have forgotten that you're feeling nervous. And then we can just, you know, we will manage that and so forth. But it's really good if you say you're feeling nervous. You know, communication is an essential part of working in ecology. So it's really good to communicate how you're feeling. And again, your CV, you know, make sure you're going to get asked on it. So make sure you've got the questions ready, going back to those bat surveys or whatever, you know, or your botanical work. What species did you identify? What grasses did you identify? SWOT up beforehand. What soft skills can you bring to the process and so forth? And also, you're on a journey as well. You want to find out, is this consultancy good for me? Ask lots of questions about the role. What are you going to try not to phrase it as what are you going to do for me, but try and say, you know, I want to be part of a team. How does a team work? And you know, how do you manage the unsociable hours? All those questions are really valid. How do you manage welfare? How do you manage time in lieu? They're all good questions, but make sure your emphasis is on positive questions rather than a balance be struck with questions about, you know, the overall balance of the organization. But you want to know, if you want this job, are you going to an employer that's going to look after you? And that's very important. And some added value here, some typical questions that you might be asked. Real easy one, which will go across, I think, the sectors to some extent. SWOT up on legislation. It doesn't take long to look at the relevant legislation that we deal with that forms the framework of our work. And make sure you're up to date. You know, what's happening with the Environment Act, major new piece of legislation. What species are on Schedule 5 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act? What species are on Schedule 1? What species are we dealing with? What frames our work? What qualities do you need to be a consultant? Think about that question. It's going to come at you. What do you need? You need empathy. You need to understand that the person you're dealing with, your client, may have no interest in ecology whatsoever. He or she may be really, really keen, but he or she has probably got a tight budget, and this is a hindrance to it. So you've got to understand the client's perspective. Really important. Commercial awareness. We're always looking for commercial awareness. It's rare in ecology, but we're really interested in people who've got commercial sense. How can you promote that? Ask questions. How do how do we make a profit on jobs? Ask about the commercial side, because people don't think about that. And also, you know, flatter us, make us feel that you want to be there. What is it about working for MKA or BSG or WSP? What makes you want to work for them? Oh, sorry. So I'm going to pass over now to Rachel, who's going to talk about the public sector, which is an amazing place to work. So Rachel, if you're quite happy to take over from here, and I'll keep quiet for a bit.
Thank you, Marcus. I think what you've gone over is incredibly useful, regardless as to which sector you're interested in. But now I'm talking to that one person in the audience who's interested in a job in the public sector, and hopefully I'll be able to persuade a few more of you, especially those who are undecided, to apply for jobs in the public sector and a government organisation. The best thing about the public sector and the government organisations is that the job application format is pretty much the same, regardless as to which government body you're applying to, whether that's Natural England, whether that's SEPA, whether that's Natural Resources Wales or the Environment Agency. All the applications are pretty much the same. Firstly, they're all online. It's all done online, so there's no sending off letters or CVs via email. It's all done under one central platform, which you need to make an account for, and then it saves your answers, saves who you are on your personal account. Once you apply for a job and start looking at the application, all applications begin with screening questions, such as whether you're eligible to work in the UK, whether you've got any criminal convictions, whether you've got any people, family who already work for that organisation. And that's just a simple screening process that you see in a lot of job applications. Then it goes on to ask more for personal details, such as your name, your address, etc. And at the end, there'll be a question on whether you've got any disabilities that you want to disclose, and this will be used at the interview. So, for example, if you've got say you're dyslexic, you might get a bit longer just to look at the question at interview if you get selected, just to look over that question and digest it a bit more. Now, the thing is, your line manager, your future line manager, or the recruiting manager doesn't actually see any of that. All they see is the competency questions, and that's what the main focus of the job application is. So competency questions are situational based questions, such as provide a time when you communicated effectively with a range of different audiences, or tell us a time when you worked well in a team. You might have 3 or 4 of those, depending on which grade you're applying to. Now, as Marcus said earlier, it's great to know that you're speaking to a well-rounded person. And with these particular competencies, it doesn't necessarily matter whether you use an example from a job, or whether you use it from a hobby, or whether, say, you're a team captain for a sports team. You can use any examples to answer these competency questions that you'd like. You've only got 250 words. It's recommended that you only use 1 example for each competency question, and it's recommended that you use what we call the STARE technique, which STARE standing for the situation that you're in, describing the situation you're in, describing what task you were assigned, how you undertook that task in terms of an action, what the result was, and how you would evaluate what you did, and what worked well, and if you were to do it again, what didn't work so well, or what you would change to make better. And these just need to be really obvious points written in your application. It needn't be more than a couple of sentences for each one. What is important is that you talk about what you did. We don't want to hear about what your team did or what we did. The recruiting manager wants to hear what you did, because that's the skill that you're trying to demonstrate. The same questions you used at interview, and it must be given you must present these answers in the same way. You just might elaborate a bit more on some of the skills that you used. For example, some jobs may ask that you undertake a technical test. So this could range from something daft like looking at codes to see what the difference in the code is. I'm not explaining this very well. Just looking for attention to detail. You might be given sets of numbers and you have to circle the number that's different. It might range from that, or it might be a bit more technical where you have to describe sort of how a river system works and what risks there might be due to flooding, or how you would approach it. But it can be all theoretical. You can draw those skills from when you took river dynamics at university. You can think about what you learned in that module to apply to that question. So in summary, the public sector relies on competency-based questions. Those are only the things that the recruiting manager sees, and once they've selected a few, they can see everything except for the bit about disabilities, which the recruiters look at in order to apply whether you need any adjustments made at interview stage. And each of your examples given doesn't necessarily need to be related to the job that you're doing currently. It can be used, you can use any example so long as you use the STARE method. That's important, that bit, and you must describe what you did. And that sums up pretty much how you apply for a job in the public sector. And I'll let Marcus move on to the next slide, which I think is academia. So I'll be passing on to Jennifer next.
Yep, me next. So I'm speaking to an audience of 0, I believe. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and persuade you all why you should have a career in academia, as well as how to get a career in academia. So I think one way to look at academia is it's like the foundation for everything else to do with conservation and ecology and environmental management's built on. It's that evidence gathering part of the process. So academia gathers the evidence, public sector very often uses that evidence to develop policy and strategy, and then consultancy has to use that policy and strategy to deliver how we live our lives. And so academia can be really exciting because you're kind of at the start of something, developing new methods to monitor biodiversity change, or particular geotextiles to deal with green infrastructure. So that is my pitch for why to come and work in academia. To get work in academia, one thing to always remember is, again, it's just building on everything else you've heard so far, but to remember that the person viewing your application has looked at lots of them. So try and keep your application really simple and clean and concise text, because people are looking at lots of them. And also the people, there tends to be quite a diverse group of people working in academia, and English is very often not people's first language. So bear that in mind in the text you actually use in your application. There's no one size fits all application process. Like in public sector, it's very strict format. In academia, it can depend what you're applying for, whose group you're applying to, what university. So there's not really a kind of framework for that, other than you will be asked for a CV, and you will almost certainly be asked for a personal statement, and that's where you kind of sell your skills. When I applied for the job that I now have, I made sure I knew who was going to be on my interview panel, so that I could, as Marcus said right at the start, charm the person that who is interviewing you. So find out what their skills are and try and weave that into your application and your interview as well. Try and find out. In academia, a lot of people have different titles, and so it's quite a good idea to try and find out what people's titles are as well when you're writing to them. It's always dear doctor, dear professor, dear Mr., Mrs., whatever. Because jobs in academia are the kind of evidence gathering part of ecology, environmental management, conservation. Because they're data driven, you need to have good skills in Excel, R, GIS, these kind of data handling programs. You don't need to know everything about it before you walk in the door, but an understanding of how a lot of these work is really useful. Depending on either the job or the course or a PhD that you're applying for, having good numeracy skills is really important in academia. So spend some time getting to grips with handling data and analysing it in R, because that's where everything's moving these days. It's really difficult to get away from not having a reasonably good statistics head on your shoulders if you're getting into academia and conservation. The currency in academia is written output. So having good communication skills is important in all jobs. In academia, the kind of writing aspect of that communication is particularly important, because that's what the success of academic projects are usually measured against, is how many publications or reports are kind of produced. So if you have the opportunity to practice writing, or at least even reading scientific journals to see this basic structure of them, that's really helpful for the person that you're applying to kind of let them understand you understand that's part of the job. Juggling academic projects can be quite tricky because they tend to have lots of different facets to them. So being able to manage your time effectively, understand when deadlines are due, as I suspect, and every job is the same, we all have deadlines to work to, but being able to do that autonomously, so under your own steam, is really useful in academia. So sort of showing those sort of skills in your application and in interview. Most interviews will have a presentation where you do a short PowerPoint type of presentation about yourself, about the skills that you're bringing, and about what you can bring to a specific project. And again, it's a good idea to, ask whoever, if you get selected for interview, ask who is in your interview panel, and just have a look around to see what their interests are as well, and just bring some of them into that interview. It kind of shows, who you're speaking to, how to do research, how to get information about people and what they're interested in. And also, as I said, Marcus said, play to people's egos a bit, because that always goes over quite well, but not too much. It's that kind of fine balance. And what I often do in interviews is I also give people a kind of exercise. I either give them, a data set to have a look at, or even just a chart to interpret, something like that. So sometimes you might get a sort of skills exercise to assess how well developed some of your skills are. And again, it's, don't oversell yourself. If you can't do it, say it. You'd far rather somebody was upfront and honest about something and said, oh, I can do this, but I can't do that. And so, yeah, just in interview, you will almost certainly be asked to do a presentation, and there might be some kind of skills exercise that goes along with that as well, depending on what level you're applying to. But yeah, working in academia is really good fun, because you get to explore all sorts of aspects of conservation, particularly, which is what I'm interested in, that go where your imagination takes you. So it's a good place to work. I highly recommend it.
Thank you, Jennifer. There's quite a few questions in the chat about academia. I think one of the reasons you probably didn't get so many people going for it is that people see it as perhaps at a higher level than where they're at now. But if you have a look at the chat, there's some good questions there which you could answer. And for those of you as well, I'd point you to the chat as well about, there's a really great answer from a member of our committee, Hayley, about a question I talked about earlier about traveling, how you can make traveling a real positive. I just move on. So if introducing Paul now, who, as I said earlier, is Chief Executive of Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Marcus, and hi, everyone. So I'm Chief Executive of Notts Wildlife Trust, and also an ecological consultancy. So it's been fascinating this afternoon to find out how to apply for my own jobs, which is excellent. And I do wish someone had laid on something like this for me kind of many years back when I was trying to start out. It's been really, really interesting. So I'm going to run through a little bit around the kind of charity and NGO sector. And I guess the starting point is, which isn't a bullet point on there, but I think it's fair to say it's variable. And I think I make that point because of Rachel's comments earlier around the public sector, and possibly an element of Jennifer's around the academic sector as well, is that you will find that whichever charity and NGO you go to, that it will be slightly different. There will be some commonality, and I think the points that Marcus raised earlier were really excellent kind of baseline information, really, in terms of what you should be thinking about. But it's fair to say that probably every different charity has got a slightly different way of doing it. So I'm trying to capture some elements that are hopefully going to be kind of quite general and give you a general steer. And I guess the first thing really is around this kind of sense of being values driven. So I think in certain parts of our sector, you will earn more money than in others. And I think in the charity sector, we do try to kind of benchmark across the sector, but also it's quite difficult for the charity sector to match consultancy salaries in many cases. So you will probably earn more if you become a consultant, and you may be happier, but you might not. And it's very interesting really about how different people feel within a commercial environment versus a kind of charity environment or an academic environment. And you just got to find your kind of comfortable space. But I would say don't just follow the money. Just do really think about what kind of environment you like to work in, because being paid more comes with sometimes more pressure and targets and other things and ways of working that you may or may not be comfortable with, but you might thrive within. So I think that sense of really what is driving you, what are the values, what change do you want to see in the world, what difference do you want to make, that kind of thing. And then have a really honest thoughts really around how you want to follow that career path following those values. The second point really is around the breadth of opportunity within the kind of charity and NGO sector. So I've noted a few points here, and I think it's useful to think sometimes in terms of your career path, there will be forks in the road. I know there's certainly been a few forks in the road in terms of my career path, where I thought I was going to get more into kind of on the ground practical conservation, but ended up doing policy. And I think that was a fork in the road, and I think you will encounter them. So I think it's useful to think really about how you recognize that within your own career, and think about actually the charity sector can offer a very wide breadth of opportunity, from doing planning related work, from doing practical conservation delivery, to doing species reintroductions, to doing species monitoring, to policy advocacy, etc. So I think it's thinking beyond just the kind of purely ecological species habitat delivery and environmental management. So thinking really in terms of that breadth. I think the third point there is comes down to the application and just giving something of yourself within the application. I think Marcus captured this brilliantly in his opening few bullet points. We want to see we want to see the personality, we want to see that you care and that you're really interested in not only the role but the organization. But please avoid exclamation marks. It's a bit of a bugbear of mine, but the overuse of exclamation marks it just doesn't look professional, and it looks a little bit childish in some I believe. But we want energy, we want passion, we want to see that enthusiasm. So try to write in that style where it allows. Because it also, just going to Marcus's point earlier, put yourself in the position of that person reading these forms. We want to feel inspired, we want to feel motivated, we want to feel connected to the person behind the form. So bland statements don't cut it. Flexibility and adaptability. So I think within a lot of our roles, we've obviously got job descriptions and person specifications, but I do feel that there is room to be creative and innovative in a number of roles, and to kind of develop roles as well as you're in them. So I think it's having that sense of kind of flexibility and adaptability. You won't be a robot. And I think that's the case in consultancy and in academia and in others. You've got to think for yourself, think creatively within these roles as well. So if you're wanting to go into a profession where you just want to be told what to do and in a kind of repetitive way, then this is not the space for you. And then finally, the thing around personal development and willingness to learn. I think it's, again, thinking about what extra you're bringing to the table, whether it's kind of external activities that you're doing, whether it's, as you say, someone said earlier, team sports, or are you in a choir? Are you in a have you when you've traveled been and done the kind of followed your passions, going back to my first point around the values, Have you demonstrated that following your passions and your interests in different aspects? Have you done any kind of volunteering, or have you taken yourself off on a training course, or done any shadowing with others, just to show that you're kind of one step ahead or one step above all the rest of the people who will be applying for these roles? But I think the main thing really is about just giving that sense of yourself. I think we want to employ human beings who express some emotion, who express some care and kind of love what they're doing. And I think that's the main thing. And I think that will make you, as someone said, a rounded applicant. I think that's what we're looking for. So good luck, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Some really, really good points there. Values driven, that's such an important thing. It goes across the board there. I mean, perhaps especially within the charity sector, but we're looking at values. You know, you've got to look at ecology as a vocation. It's one of those vocational careers. It's like teaching or so forth. It's not a 9 to 5. You're at the beginning of your career, taxonomic groups, you've got to learn those taxonomic groups. You're never going to learn it on the job. You've got to put the time in at weekends, on your walk to Sainsbury's. You've got to, what plants am I seeing? What birds am I seeing? What mammal track is that in the snow? You've got to develop your skill set. So you've got to be thinking that way, and you've got to be showing the starting point of that at your interview. Okay, so, and with a real apology to Sarah, because I didn't introduce her at the start, Sarah Hoyle is a assistant ecologist at Smead and Foreman and a mature student, and she's going to talk a bit about the peculiar challenges that offers, but also, you know, the opportunities that are there. Sarah, over to you, and apologies again.
It's fine. Thank you, Marcus. Yeah, good evening, everybody. So I was a mature student graduating 18 months ago, and like a lot of people now, I imagine I came out and I was like, what am I going to do now? Where's the guidance? So hopefully this will, along with the other advice you've already heard, will provide you a bit more guidance with regards to applications. And sort of, I've been reading some CVs recently, and I have noticed that some of these things have been missing from those CVs, which obviously sort of puts you slightly down the list in your hopes of getting a job. So the most important thing is, we've touched upon it briefly, is highlight your transferable skills. So in lieu of more industry specific experience, and I have sort of seen a question which I was halfway through answering, and I will get back to in a moment in the chat. Potential employers will look at the skills, see what your potential may be, or your willingness to train to improve the skills that you currently have. And it obviously demonstrates your ability to learn quickly as well. So soft skills, which I don't think have been touched upon, are problem solving, clear communication, both written and verbal. We've touched upon written with report writing, time management, your adaptability, organisational and leadership skills. Technological literacy is a key one, especially in consultancy. You more often than not these days, you're sort of doing a lot of things online. You're interacting with a lot of people through email, clients, etc. Dependability, data analysis, your attention to detail. It's just noticing the little things which, if you receive a data set from a record centre and you're sort of looking and you're thinking something's not quite right, getting back in touch with them and clarifying things. Ability to work under pressure. Consultancy at times can be quite a pressured environment to work in if you've got deadlines for reports, because there's planning applications waiting on your findings, or clients are wanting your report so they can decide how to proceed with their planning application. And also working as part of a team is very key. I work in a multidisciplinary consultancy, so we've got landscape architects and arboriculturists in our consultancy. So working across the board with those and liaising with those disciplines as well can inform our reports when we're doing those. On your CV, list these skills. You may see them as unimportant, but they are actually quite important. If you list them, and choose which of those skills you think will be most beneficial in the role you're applying for as well, and highlight those. So in your professional experience section, or if you are a career changer, highlight instances where you've applied these skills in your current role, and then you may be asked to expand upon these in interview. So be fully prepared to explain what you've put in your CV. It can also be beneficial just to include a short 2 or 3 sentences in your cover letter when you're sending that in. Not everybody will read your CV word for word, so if you put in that in your cover letter as well, it will highlight that to your prospective employer, that you have these skills, and then they may progress on to reading your CV in more detail. When I was applying for jobs 18 months ago, I thought the life experience that I had, because I worked in a supermarket previously to this and had part-time jobs, I didn't think that counted for much, but it actually does. The life experience you've gained through your current career or through the challenges you face studying as a mature student count for quite a lot, because it can demonstrate your adaptability to different situations and how you tackled challenging situations as well. So as a mature student, I sort of had to balance working and studying full time, and also volunteering as well. I did quite a bit of volunteering as well for the last few years. So showing that I'm able to manage those 3 separate situations well and still come out and be able to present a rounded figure for a prospective employer is looked upon favourably. In fact, one of the things that was discussed when I was applying for my current job in my interview was volunteering, so I volunteer with the RSPB. So if you can get relevant volunteering experience, do so. I mean, I know it may be difficult for some sort of transport issues and things, but just try. Local back groups, the RSPB, Woodland Trust, lots of charities and NGOs actually encourage volunteering. I think the RSPB recently had a big sort of drive to encourage more volunteering. So just look, you don't know what's out there. As we've already touched upon, make sure you are researching the company you're applying to. That is very important. As a career changer or a mature student, some prospective employers may expect you to be more prepared because you've been through the interview process more than once potentially with your current career. So you may come to interview and the prospective employer is hoping or expecting you to be up on what the company does, the types of reports and things you may be writing. If you have an example of written work, feel free to bring that to interview. It's always nice to see. And something that sort of went across well in interview recently with a candidate with us is they knew themselves that they weren't so good with their ID skills, and in this interview we provided a short sort of ID test. It's 2 sides of A4. They knew their ID skills weren't as good or where they wanted them to be, so they actually came on prepared with ID guides and keys, which they were able to use in interview and say, well, maybe get it down to family if not species directly, but it just shows that you are prepared, you're willing to learn, and it also shows an awareness in yourself and in your current skills, which is again looked upon favourably. And if you are unfortunately unsuccessful, it will potentially knock you a little bit, but don't let that put you off from asking feedback from the interview, from the application, because then it will then see what, if you're applying for similar jobs, it will show where the sort of similar companies are looking for skills, what skills you may need to improve upon, what areas of your interview you may need to develop. So if you maybe sort of didn't come across quite so well at interview, then you can sort of improve that, get people to do mock interviews with you. If you're not so good at interviews, if you get really nervous, get somebody to just help you prepare. I'm sure if you look online, there will be sort of standard questions that come across in interview. Rachel has discussed some that will come up. Just prepare answers for those and try and memorize them or learn them and get used to answering those sorts of questions, and it will hopefully stand you in good stead for the next interview that you come across and you come to, and you will hopefully be successful in that. That
Thank you.
is me.
Thank you, Sarah. That was really, really useful. And just some, you know, I've employed several mature students, and it's always been, they brought a huge amount of added value to the consultancy, and it's certainly something that I'm very much in favor of. One thing from my perspective, I'm always conscious of when I'm looking at a mature student applying for a post where they're perhaps taking a drop in salary, is them saying, because they're less experienced in this field, them saying, I am conscious of the fact that, you know, this position would involve a different salary bracket, and I'm willing to discuss that at interview, because there's obviously a bit of quid pro quo there. We've got to get the balance right, but it is an issue. Salary can be an issue with a mature student that people are worried about, and it's something that we probably best to hit head on. But I mean, some great stuff there from Sarah. There's also some great questions in the chat that I've clocked, and some challenging questions, but very quickly, if we could just move, there's a really interesting talk being given by the Marine and Coastal Special Interest Group. So if I could just go to Athena, who, if I could ask her to quickly just publicize this event, because I'm sure it'd be of interest to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm the secretary for the Marine and Coastal Special Interest Group, and we are, as Marcus said, putting on an event next Monday from 1 till 2, sort of like an introduction to careers in the marine sector. It's the same as this, a webinar, so it'll be easy to join. We have an array of committee members who have volunteered to basically talk you through how they ended up in the position they're in and what sort of options you have in the marine sector for career paths. So our convener and vice convener will both be talking. Our convener is Claire, who I'm sure will be very popular because she works with dolphins in Hawaii. So the dream for most people. And then we have Richard, who's a senior marine ecologist at a consultancy firm, and has a background in marine policy as well. Ashley, who's also specializes in marine mammals. She's a senior consultant at APEM. We also have an example of a career change. We have David, who will be presenting, who used to be an engineer and has moved into working for the Marine Management Organization. So there'll be further tips on changing career paths. And finally, I'll also be presenting. I'm very new in the field. I've been in my position. I'm in work for environmental consultancy, and I've been there less than a year, sort of fresh out of university. So I know how it feels to be faced with the daunting challenge of trying to get a job in the ecology, any sort of ecology field. But yeah, I'm come along and we're hoping to shed some light on what is famously quite a mysterious field to try and get into. So hopefully we can do that if you come along.
Thank you so much, Athena. That's great. It's an amazing field. And wow, yeah, I wouldn't mind a job in that. Okay, so questions. There's some really good questions in the chat, and one of which two of which I will perhaps hit head on first of all. Somebody asked about office skills, which I think was relating to when I was talking earlier. What office skills do you think about? In terms of consultancy, what are we looking at? We need to generate reports quickly that go out to clients that have no ecological knowledge. So we need to be able to speak in a language that meets the criteria that a lay person can understand. So report writing is a skill set. GIS is an obvious skill set that all our staff, because we're quite small, all our staff use GIS. So if you have GIS skills, think about the skills required for that job. Think about the office skills. Obviously, data analysis is another area. Perhaps our data is quite at a simple level, quite often in consultancy, maybe different in a bigger consultancy. But those kind of things to think about. Another challenging question that was asked before we go for more questions was somebody spoke about the gaps in his CV due to mental health issues. That's a really challenging question, and if I can answer it honestly, I would suggest that if you have two options there. You either have to hit it head on and say, I had mental health issues, but these will not apply. You know, I'm at a stage where I can take on a job and work extensively, and the nature of the work will not affect that mental health. Now, obviously, in something like consultancy, we have periods of working of antisocial hours, and that can be really challenging for mental health. So ask yourself the question, is that the right job for you? Because if you're getting periods of disturbed sleep, you know, that can affect your mental health. So that there are issues there. The other approach to it is not bringing it up until you're at the interview stage, but that question is going to come, and what you need to convince the employer is that you're going to be, you know, obviously we accept that people will have time off for various different illnesses, and mental health is no different to that. But any employer, frankly, will be nervous about somebody who's going to be off of work a lot, because that can be the difference between profit and loss with a small company. So it's a difficult balance there, and there's not an easy answer. And I hope that answers that question a bit. But if I were you, I wouldn't be talking about it until you got to interview level. That's
sorry, Marcus. Can I come in on that as well? Just
yeah, it's a sensitive subject, and I hope that's not.
So Saeem's doing quite a lot of work around this too. We've just recruited a new diversity and inclusion officer, and as part of her role, she's going to be focusing on how to make the sector more accessible, and mental health awareness is quite a big part of that. So more and more companies within the ecology and environmental sector now are aware of this, and have their own policies in place to hopefully help and support employees too. But if you have any questions on that specifically, do look up Lee Nightingale at Saeem and have a chat to her. She'd be a really good contact for you if you want to know more around that sector.
Could you put that in the chat, please? That would be really useful. Any other questions in the chat? I know that Jennifer's been busy and Hayley's been giving some great answers as well. Are there any other questions that people would like to ask? Feel free to go ahead now and just ask the question. Just put your hand up, or just put it in the chat. We are slightly over time, but
hi. There was a question I wanted to ask. It's too long to type, so if I can speak it out.
Yeah, of course, go ahead.
All right. I recently came to the UK about a year and a half back. I'm an academic back in India, where I'm a professor of environmental studies. And I've been here for a year and a half. I was looking for consultancies in environment or ecology. And I've done a lot of work in this. I've got published work, and I've done all the things that you mentioned how to apply. I mean, but every time I send an application, I get a rejection that you are not shortlisted. And I'm really surprised how I'm not being shortlisted. So I would just like is too much experience bad, or how does it work?
If other members of the committee can put their hand up to answer that, but I will go first, David. Thank you for that. And I'm sorry to hear about the difficulties. I think you're probably one of those mature students who are suffering from being incredibly experienced, and people, I think, you know, the cost of you might be an issue with that. And what kind of job are you applying for? Are you applying for a senior role where you're managing staff? Because that's something where you could have a real...
Yeah, that's what I'm applying for. Senior ecologist. I'm applying for senior ecologist. There was only one company, APEM, that responded positively, but then they said that we cannot afford the salary you asked. And also, because I'm new to UK, I don't know what is the salary at which. I just asked the same salary that I'm currently getting as a Marie Curie researcher at Strathclyde University. And that was about £60,000. And they said, we cannot afford that So that was about it.
Did you say 60?
Yeah.
Well, David, that's more than I earn.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So that, you know, that's the truth of it.
So what is the range I should actually put for, for an
Well,
senior
it depends
ecologist?
what you can afford, really, David. But you know, I think senior ecologist, there are some things, Simon are putting some things up on this, trying to get people to advertise the prices, and we do that. Drew, I can't remember what the price is. I could put my head around the corner and say.
I was thinking again, a good place to go for this would be the Green Jobs for Nature website, because some people on there have specified the types of roles that they do along with the salary range. So it might give you an idea of what they're going for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could just chip in. I think as a general rule, if you're looking at a senior ecologist salary, you're looking somewhere between probably 27,000 and about 40. But the truth of it is that grades and their responsibilities will vary according to company. So it's worth looking then at the actual spec of the role to see how it's pitched. I think the salary that you're quoting would be probably more aligned to a experienced principal or associate director. In some companies don't have an associate role, and then it would be a technical director type salary.
Okay, thank you. This helps.
I wonder if the other thing to think about is the legislation and understanding the policy environment. You know, if you're new to the UK, I don't actually know where the easiest way to get that information is, but that might be another thing that might help, is understanding what the legislative landscape looks like in the areas you're applying, which would probably help.
Another good question. There's a couple of good questions about consultancy there. There was one asking whether it's best to work your way up or which consultancy to move in. I'm just trying to find it again now. So I'm going to ask a different one while I was trying to find. Nathan was asked about career progression in consultancy. How long does it take? You need several years. SIM have a guidance process which we follow. So you have several years. I think it's 5 years experience before you become a senior ecologist. So there isn't a battle now. You may be able to shortcut that if you have exceptional field skills. Another way of shortcutting is getting a license for a protected species. That can help you get at least on the pay bracket of that level at an earlier date, but it is quite a slow process. And this is about it being a vocation again. You know, you've really got to develop your skill set. The quicker you develop your skill set, the faster you can move up. I don't know if anyone wants to add to that question, add anything to that, please do raise a hand. And I'm just looking at new messages here.
Marcus, there was a question earlier, which is probably directed at Paul. Why are NGO positions so competitive? And because of this, why could there not be an expansion of employment, either by expanding volunteering opportunities, training certificates, or offering accommodation in lieu of salary? So why are NGO positions so competitive? I think that's one aimed at Paul.
Thank you, Rachel. Paul, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Well, it's interesting to know that they're competitive. It's been quite an interesting recruitment market of late, where I was quite jealous of Marcus's 50 or 100 applications. It's quite an interesting kind of world out there at the moment. I think possibly because there could be fewer jobs it's certainly some of the technical jobs that we've been talking about tonight, which is why I made the point around the breadth of different roles. So you'll find certainly within the Wildlife Trust. Sorry, I think I've frozen or someone's frozen, not sure. Anyway, I'll carry on. We've got kind of conservation officers, rangers, estate management staff, etc., that they need a fairly broad range of knowledge and experience about different habitat types, management techniques, planning policy, etc. So I think there's possibly a breadth. But I think I think the real thing is probably kind of it's the supply and demand, possibly in some cases as well. Is that there lots of people have kind of reevaluated, particularly post COVID, around the kind of around this values point, really, about what do people actually want to do and what gets them out of bed in the morning. And I think that's certainly something that we've kind of experienced in the wider kind of conversations with our kind of members and others and visitors. So perhaps that's playing through in the recruitment and employment side of it as well. I mean, I think it's fair to say that at the moment we're advertising a kind of a senior role, and we've had probably about a dozen applicants, and we've only actually shortlisted 2. So hence why I was jealous of Mark's 50 odd applications for different roles. So I think it's definitely worth kind of getting stuck in at this time. I think there are quite a lot of roles out there that I've seen that look relatively attractive. So I'd definitely say to go for it.
I think it's probably worth saying as well in the NGO and charity sector, once you're kind of on that ladder and in that family, it's easier then to progress forward. I used to work for the RSPB and go through applications at the RSPB, particularly for jobs at entry level. And from my perspective as a volunteer engagement officer, looking for how volunteering experience is then related back to that. But from my experience, NGOs and charities often tend to really favour those people who have already in some form networked with them in the past, and that might be through volunteering, it might be simply through actually just coming in and saying hello and who they are and that kind of thing. From my experience, I think the entry level jobs to get you on that ladder in the first place can be quite competitive, hence why people who have volunteered time in the past for those companies tend to be favoured. Once you're on that ladder, it tends to then be easier, hopefully, to progress upward through that. I hope that's okay to say, Paul.
That's great, Drew. Thank you. Just to reassure Paul, I may have been waxing a bit lyrical with 50. That's probably the olden days. It's fewer now, but certainly for senior positions, Paul, I'd be delighted with that many applications. It's much more challenging to get senior positions. I realise we're over time and I'm going to call it in 5, but Catherine asked the question, early in your career, is the ability to work across a range of consultancy to gain range of experience or stay at one to work way up? So I would say to that, it depends on your consultancy. If you work at a small consultancy, certainly, or small to medium consultancy, you probably get a wider breadth of experience. If you move jobs quickly, people might look on that with some suspicion. Suspicion is probably too strong a word, but you get what I'm saying. But what you need to do is get a breadth of experience. If you're not getting that in your current employment, you need to move to somebody who offers that. And different consultancies work in different ways. Smaller ones, you tend to get your hands in every pie. Bigger ones, you can end up very, very specialized. But if you talk to Jenny at WSP, that doesn't seem to happen with that consultancy. So it depends very much on the consultancy. But if you are getting siloed, then you need to think about moving, because the thing about ecology is that you need to experience a broad church. Are there any other questions that people would like to answer, or any other questions people would like to ask?
I think it would be useful to answer the question on declaring disabilities, because I'm conscious at the last event we also had another question regarding disabilities and when to declare, and that also got missed. So I don't know, personally, I would like some discussion regarding disabilities in, for example, consultancy or public sector, or NGOs and academia. Well, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course. I've kind of said my piece on that, which is coming from at that interview stage. I don't think I've got anything to add. So has anyone got anything to add on that?
In academia, I don't know the exact detail, but in academia, you can ask for there's a specific type of application if you feel you have met all the desired criteria, that you still are allowed to, or not allowed, you still are given the opportunity to appear at interview. But I can't remember the detail of it. I'm sorry, that's not very helpful, but there are mechanisms in place to ensure that they are fair.
Yeah, it's similar at the public sector where it's like the guaranteed interview scheme, where if you hit the minimum criteria in your application, then you automatically get an interview.
Yeah, it's the same.
There's that question on the bottom that's just come in, which was about does a master's degree make a difference? If you have today's question. So does a master's degree have an impact on starting salary, and does it have an advantage over an undergrad during the application process? I mean, Carla, I hope this isn't unfortunate if you've already done a master's, but one thing sort of Saeem recommends on this is having a look at the kind of jobs and roles you'd want to apply for and their asking requirements before taking on a master's, if you feel it's right for you, because not all roles require a master's degree. I would have a look at where there are transferable skills and knowledge for a master's degree that you could say that may potentially separate you from the crowd. Does it have an impact on starting salary though? I would guess probably not. I think most roles are advertised with a starting salary already given. I think it depends on the type of role you're going for. But I think a master's degree can separate you from the crowd depending on the role you're going for. And there are some roles out there where master's degree is a requirement as a minimum education level. So just worth having a look at that. I hope that helps.
As another kind of backup to that, our seasonal roles last year, 2 of us had masters, 1 of us didn't, and the one who didn't actually had a higher salary than we did because he had more experience and he put his time into doing more voluntary and paid work than we had while we were trying to do everything at once. So because he had all the experience and the certificates to back that up, he got more. So it's not necessarily about the degree, it's about the experience that you have related to it.
Yeah, and I'll say the same as well. In choosing people for different roles at university, it's the same. It's the person it's not necessarily what academic qualifications they've got. It's the skills and their ability that you're employing, not the bits of paper.
Yeah, as a director, we will not put extra weight on. Well, we look at people's academic qualifications. If they've got this distinction, we're very interested in them, or they've got not necessarily a distinction. If they've got a good MSc, we're very interested in them, and it swings them with the lack of field skills, but with an absence of field skills. But I really move towards people that already have field skills, and I will employ people directly from university if they have field skills. So field skills is a big part of consultancy, and it's a big part of the learning curve. So, and of course there are different types of master's degree as well, but I think Hayley's points are very pertinent there.
Thank you all for that. Yeah, I'm more interested in academia, but it's always good to just to know what's out there if I do decide to go into the sector that having a master's doesn't actually necessarily put you in front of everyone. So yeah, thank you.
It will, in fairness, it will on a scoring basis. You will score higher in the academia side of things, but that's got a weighting with field skills as well. So there is a weighting part of it, and obviously 2 degrees, you will score slightly higher, but it won't affect your salary. If that comes with other skills, then it will, but on its own it won't. At least in my consultancy. I think we're there or thereabouts. For a change, we've gone over. And thank you, especially to the likes of Drew for staying late, because he does many of these events, and it's much appreciated. But I would really like to thank our speakers today and the committee for bringing this together. And did we have another Did you have another question, or did we? I'm not sure we did. I think we might have. I think we were going to. I'm not sure we did. I think we're going to ask one on feedback, but I don't think we got that ready. But we are very professional, and we would never have forgotten anything. But apart from that, everyone, thank you very much. And we are around. There is the LinkedIn group. Ask a question on there. Do keep in touch, and we'd like to all wish you the very best of luck and to help us all make a difference for the environment together. And the very best wishes to you all in your new careers. And I'll sign off there unless there's anything from anyone else.
So thank you very much again for all our attendees. Thank you to the volunteers and speakers for making this happen as well. Really appreciated. And to all of you who have attended and stuck it out this far, I would rate your chances of getting further in your career perhaps more than others. So
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, well put.
Thank you, everyone. Nice
all.
to meet you.
So someone's just asked about the LinkedIn group. Can I quickly just post the link?
Yeah, go for it, Rachel.
Yeah,
We'll just say, yeah.
Sorry, everyone may leave. Isn't this saved in the chat? So